She missed the most important day of her family's life, her own brother's wedding. And when the reason was finally revealed, every guest inside that hall froze in horror. If you think family sacrifices are tough, imagine choosing between your blood and your country. This is the story of a woman whose secret mission changed everything. Before we dive deep into this gripping journey of betrayal, love, and unstoppable courage, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now because you do not want to miss the kind of stories that the government doesn't want you to hear. Stories where ordinary women become extraordinary heroes, stories that the USA and UK audiences connect with because they're about choices, freedom, and the price of protecting it. It was supposed to be the happiest day for her family, the kind of day that united generations, where laughter echoed through decorated halls and champagne glasses clinked under golden chandeliers, where her brother, the only sibling she had left, would take vows in front of hundreds of guests. But while everyone dressed in elegance and took their seats in the wedding hall, she was hundreds of miles away. Her face buried under night vision goggles, her heartbeat synced with the silence of a covert operation, because she wasn't just a sister, she was a field operative working under one of the most secretive branches of Allied intelligence between the US and UK. And her mission wasn't something she could deny, not even for family, not even for blood. She had received the call less than 48 hours before the wedding, a coded message that made her hands tremble because the location pointed to an enemy compound that had been untraceable for years, a facility believed to be storing not just weapons, but something deadlier. Encrypted drives that contained blueprints for coordinated attacks across London and Washington, the kind of attacks that could paralyze two nations in one blow. So when she chose duty over her brother's wedding, she sealed her place as the invisible protector, the unsung warrior whose name would never be known, and as she crawled through the dirt, whispering commands to her comms team, flashes of her brother smiling in his wedding suit stabbed her heart. But she carried on because freedom had a higher price than comfort, and she knew she had to pay it. The compound stood like a fortress carved out of shadows, its blackened walls half buried in desert sands that stretched endlessly under a silver moon, and she, cloaked in darkness, crept closer with every controlled breath, each heartbeat synchronized with the whisper of the wind. The air smelled of oil, dust, and the faint smoke of burning wood, and she knew that inside those walls lay the reason she had sacrificed her family's joy tonight, the reason she had abandoned her brother's vows and her mother's tears, intelligence that could decide the fate of thousands. She pressed her gloved hand against the rough stone, scanning the perimeter through night vision goggles, watching the guards in rotating patterns, rifles slung, their faces hidden beneath scarves, unaware that a woman alone had already infiltrated their killing field. But she wasn't reckless. She was disciplined. Her training under both British SAS advisors and American Delta operators had taught her to make silence her strongest weapon. And so, like a phantom, she cut across the sand, her boots leaving barely a trace, her mind replaying the plan she had memorized like scripture. Neutralize outer sentries, breach the western hatch, reach the inner chamber, secure the drives, extract before detection. Yet reality was never as clean as plans. For one guard lingered too long at his post, humming a tune in a language she half understood. And when his torch beam swept dangerously close to her position, she made her decision in the span of a heartbeat. Lunging forward with a blade, one hand covering his mouth as the other found the gap between ribs, his body twitching once before slumping silently into her arms, and she dragged him behind a rusted vehicle, whispering an apology he would never hear because even though he was the enemy, he was still a human life extinguished, and she carried the weight of every one of them. Moving forward, she planted micro-cameras disguised as pebbles, each one feeding live visuals back to the operations room in London, where analysts whispered updates, their calm voices belying the chaos she tiptoed through. And as she slipped, inside the western hatch, a rusted steel door that groaned softly, the darkness thickened, swallowing her whole, but her instincts sharpened, every nerve in her body awake. The interior smelled of damp metal and gun oil, the hum of generators echoing faintly, and she realized this was no crude militant camp. This was organized, almost military grade, the kind of place where betrayal brewed in silence, where defectors sold secrets not for ideology, but for profit. As she descended a stairwell lit by a single flickering bulb, she passed rooms stacked with ammunition, crates marked not with foreign insignia, but with NATO codes, and her chest tightened because this confirmed her worst fear. Someone from within their own alliances had supplied this operation. Someone had bled loyalty dry and fed it to wolves. She snapped photos, her camera flashing silently, the images instantly encrypted and sent across satellites. But then she entered a chamber that made her freeze. Dozens of computer servers lined against reinforced walls, cables snaking across, the floor like veins, their screens glowing with encrypted maps, and in the middle, a steel table with crates bearing the same crest her brother once wore on his uniform during deployment. The same crest her family proudly framed in their home, and her stomach turned to stone because it meant this operation wasn't just a faceless threat. It was linked to the very institutions her brother trusted his life to. She was about to step forward when a metallic click sliced through the silence, a gun being cocked, and a voice, low, steady, laced with betrayal, whispered from the shadows. "You shouldn't be here. I warned them you'd dig too deep." And as she turned, her weapon half raised, the figure stepped into the glow of a screen, his face half lit. A man she recognized not as an enemy, but as a former comrade from training days. A man who once swore oaths beside her, who had vanished months ago under the guise of reassignment, and her pulse thundered as the realization crashed over her that this mission wasn't about dismantling foreign threats anymore. It was about unmasking traitors who once wore the same uniform, and in that instant, the walls around her no longer felt like stone. They felt like betrayal itself, pressing in, suffocating, daring her to fight back or die buried under secrets the world was never meant to see. The wedding hall glowed like a palace, chandeliers raining down golden light over tables draped in silk, laughter and music weaving together as families embraced, glasses clinked, and the groom, her brother, stood tall in his suit, pride shining. In his eyes as he waited for his bride, completely unaware that in the shadows outside, a convoy of armored vehicles rolled silently to a stop. Their engines cut, their doors bursting open as boots hit the pavement and men in dark uniforms masked. Their faces, rifles in hand, precision in every step like wolves closing in on a feast. Inside, the bride adjusted her gown nervously, her friends whispering in delight. Children chased each other between chairs, and the mother of the groom wiped tears of joy from her cheeks, while waiters carried trays of champagne through the aisles. But the moment shattered when the main doors crashed open with a thunder that silenced music and froze laughter, and a storm of armed soldiers poured into the hall, their rifles raised, their black scarves hiding their mouths, their eyes cold as stone. Guests screamed, some stumbling over chairs, others diving under tables. The bride shrieked as her veil was yanked back by one of the intruders, and the groom lunged forward only to be struck across the face with the butt of a rifle, his lip splitting, his suit stained with blood. Yet his defiance remained as he stood between his bride and the barrels aimed at her chest. And the hall that once felt like a sanctuary of love turned into a prison, every exit blocked, chandeliers reflecting. The steel of weapons instead of the sparkle of joy. The masked commander strode to the center, his boots clicking against marble, his voice amplified with authority as he declared that this was no wedding anymore, but a stage. A message to the world that no family, no joy, no tradition was safe. And every camera phone trembling in the hands of guests became an unwilling broadcast of terror. Panic surged as soldiers forced people to their knees, children sobbing, mothers pleading, men gritting their teeth as helplessness burned them alive. But amid the chaos, the groom kept his eyes locked on his bride, whispering promises through clenched teeth that he would not let anything happen to her. And the irony clawed at the air, because while his sister bled in silence on foreign soil to secure information that could have prevented this very attack, the enemy had chosen her, absence as their weapon, striking at the very family she had sworn to protect without their knowledge, turning her sacrifice into their advantage. In the command room miles away, analysts watched in horror as the intercepted data from her mission decrypted before their eyes, revealing that this wedding was not random, but a target chosen with cruel symbolism, a strike meant to humiliate the West by shattering the innocence of a family celebration. And even as she raced aboard a jet across hostile skies with blood on her gloves and fury in her veins, her brother's world was collapsing, his vows drowned out by gunfire, his guests stripped of dignity, their lives hanging by the whim of masked strangers. And in that hall of chandeliers and roses, hope seemed to vanish, until the silent storm she carried inside her would descend, and the soldiers who dared to turn a wedding into a war zone would learn that they had provoked a reckoning far greater than they imagined. By the time her plane screeched onto the runway of the nearest Allied base, the clock was already against her, every passing minute a dagger twisting deeper into her chest, because while intelligence confirmed the wedding had been stormed, no one could guarantee if her brother was alive or dead. No one could say whether the bride's trembling prayers were still being whispered under chandeliers or had been silenced forever. And as she geared up, strapping on body armor still damp from another's sweat, loading magazines with steady yet furious hands, she pushed aside the thought of the family photographs she had missed, the memories she had traded for missions, and replaced them with a singular promise. Tonight she would not fail. Tonight she would return not as the absent sister, but as the storm itself. The convoy that carried her toward the hall cut through streets littered with fear, police barricades and military vehicles already surrounding the building like spectators, frozen before a spectacle of horror. Snipers positioned on rooftops, but hesitant to fire because the masked soldiers inside had rigged the exits, their voices booming through loudspeakers demanding broadcasts to the world. Demands that shifted between political rhetoric and chilling threats to execute a hostage every hour. And as negotiators scrambled with trembling hands, she slipped away, moving not with the official units but as a lone shadow, disappearing into service tunnels mapped in her memory from blueprints she had stolen years ago on a mission that no one had ever credited her for. The tunnel reeked of damp earth and rust, rats scurrying past her boots, but she welcomed the stench because it masked her own presence, and as she climbed a maintenance ladder, the muffled cries of hostages above grew louder, the chanting of soldiers.